Kids are the ultimate forcing function. I don't know if there's anything else that causes a complete rethink of like how we do things. The reason why entrepreneurs do that, they pack their calendar with all sorts of stuff. They're willing to do anything, whatever it takes, do 40 sales calls a week with strangers who haven't put any skin in the game. It's because on some level we think that if we do more stuff, then we'll make more money. But what I find is that the truth is the exact opposite. And the caveat here is that when someone's starting out, volume really helps because there there's a certain amount of reps that need to be hit, just like with fitness and weightlifting, especially in the beginning, before the body's okay, this is what's up, this is what's happening, this is what we do. And there's a certain level of fluency that needs to be hit before we can earn the right to switch paradigms. But what I find is that most entrepreneurs, they've hit the fluency threshold. And what that means is they have a big enough audience. They know their niche. They've helped enough people. They've created enough client results. They have achieved a certain level of intimacy with their market and they know what they're doing. But it feels really scary to let go of the brute force. I'm just gonna do more calls. I'm gonna just put out more content. I'm just gonna do more because it feels scary to let go of the strategy that got us to that point. But that's, at that point. So how do we know we're at that point? We know when we start hitting diminishing returns, as in the same amount of effort produces a smaller return on effort and a return on energy. So the same 50 hours a week produces the same revenue or even sometimes less revenue. So usually at that point, what most entrepreneurs do is step on the gas harder because they're like, oh, it's not working. Let me just do more because that's what got me here, right? That's what worked in the past. But what's required is not to do more, but to actually upgrade how we think. It requires harder thinking, not harder doing, because they've actually earned the right to switch into the paradigm of doing less, but getting much better results. And the addiction to doing is actually a resistance to thinking at a higher level. And that's more uncomfortable for us. If someone's, okay, can I just work an extra 2 hours a day and make an extra 10K a month? Like most people will take that deal. But if I tell them, like, hey, I'm going to need you to think in a way that you've never been able to think before. And if you do that, then you're not going to need to work. Actually, we can take 10 hours a week off your schedule. But that feels uncomfortable. And it feels uncomfortable because it threatens the core psychological system that we're so attached to, right? We put a lot of our stuff on this sense of self. And so simplicity actually feels dangerous. Having empty space actually feels dangerous because it requires a letting go, requires a letting go of control. And so most people I talk to who are in this position, I'll get tactical for a second. What needs to happen is we need to notice what are all the places where we're brute forcing. So like sales calls are a great example. Most people think that to sell high ticket, you need to do sales calls. Not true, right? Sales calls are just a mechanism to accelerate trust and diagnose someone's exact situation so that we can establish a level of relevance. And it's to create a certain level of rapport with someone. And when all those things are present and they have a need that we can serve with a solution, then they're like, okay, I'm in. But we don't need to do that over a sales call. We can do that in a number of different ways. And I find that sales calls are basically a way to compensate for lack of clarity with more effort, right? And so that's just one example of one of the biggest time sucks that people experience, which is I'm having to do a lot more to get a fraction of the results. And this is a great example because over time, as markets get saturated, show up rates drop and it takes more energy and effort, whether it's money in terms of ad spend or posting content or stuff like that. to get someone on a sales call, right? It's harder. And when they
Yeah.
do show up, like they're not usually qualified. So now out of every 50 calls, only like seven of them would actually be great clients to work with you. So to sell to seven people, you have to get on 50 calls, and then you got to deal with follow-ups and no-shows and like all that stuff. And so this is where if we put the right systems in place and we have the right operational framework that's running the business, we can basically cut out like 50, 60% of what someone's doing. So like my model is designed when it's fully implemented, takes about less than 20 hours a week to run. And it can very comfortably generate like, 100 to 200K a month in profit, not revenue, in profit, depending on where someone is, like what sort of niche they're in, because it's different for different people. Also, depending on how far someone wants to go. Not everyone wants to have $1 million business, like 50K a month
Yeah.
in pure cash flow often is great for someone. So this whole model is designed for retention and renewal, right? Most high ticket businesses, they sell someone up front and then they lose them in 3 months or 6 months. So we don't force those constraints, and that lets people to stay as long as they want, as long as they're getting value. So it makes it super chill. So the whole thing is designed to be chill. I don't like being busy and I don't like running a high pressure business. Once we get to that point, like things get astronomically easier. That's cool too. Because usually with most models and strategies, actually the workload doubles at that point because now you're managing a team of setters and blah, 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 or whatever the complexity is. Like life doesn't get easier, life can actually gets harder. So actually most people are disincentivized to reach their goal because their model punishes them for growth, right? Because
Yeah.
their life suffers the more the business grows. So how we operate here is that as the business gets bigger, your life has to get better. If that doesn't happen, then something is misaligned. And it's much more efficient to work through that misalignment than force someone to work harder or say that, hey, you're not going to have time with your kids or you're not going to spend Friday nights with your wife. Like that doesn't feel right to me. What I find is that most of those models, Hormozy included, that's a maximalist model. And that's fine. The dangerous thing is that those people put out a lot of media. And for most people, the maximalist model does not work. It actually hurts them because A, they can't sustain it.
Yeah.
B, they don't ever want to have an army of employees who are turning the thing into a factory. Like they don't want that overhead. They don't want to manage people. They they don't want their life to just be work. And Hormozy, Vaynerchuk, like these guys are fine with that. It works for them, so it's great.
Yeah.
But what I find is for most people, what is a much better fit is a very minimalist model. So that's why I've designed my whole model around minimalism. If there's something that, like, I still haven't created a website for this,
That's so rad.
right? And there's that Google Doc that I used to sell, like, it's very plain. There isn't even a logo on it. And people think that all these sales calls, another example, like, people think all of these things are required to get results, to be successful, to get clients, to grow the business. But that is a total illusion, right? And so what we do is that we operate and act like an exponentialist. What that means is we understand fundamentally what we want out of the business. Because we
Mhm.
want enough cash flow, we want to make enough money, and ideally we have more than what's needed to actually run our life. So there's excess money left over. Second, we want freedom. We want to have the space and the time to do the things that are meaningful, hang out with friends, have hobbies like crazy idea, date nights with the wife,
Yeah.
go take vacations. Like we want to feel like we actually have a life, that the business is not sucking our life force out of us, right? And the third thing is we want to feel really turned on. We want to feel alive. We want to feel like we're making an impact. We want to feel like we're doing the thing that God put us on the planet to do. We're making a difference in people's lives. We're fueled by this, this electrifying sense of this is my music to make, this is my art, because that's what really allows us to feel fulfilled. And so this model is optimized to unlock all three of those things in the most exponential way possible, which means that every unit of input we put into the business, we try to get 10 to 100 units of output back. So we're cutting out all the stuff that's not essential, right? We're focusing on the very, very few core levers that actually get results.
Yeah.
And we're constantly pushing ourselves to think better, to think more clearly. Because the better we can think, the less we're going to need to compensate for shitty thinking with more effort. It's a completely different way to think. And there's a lot of psychology woven into the whole thing because we can't ignore the psychology that's actually driving the car. Like, you can have a Ferrari, but if the driver's drunk, not gonna go very well, can actually be dangerous. So the model has to be molded to founder. The founder psychology has to be aligned to what they want. Because often I'll have someone, an entrepreneur comes to me, I want an extra 10 hours a week because I want to spend more time with my kids. Because, okay, cool. But their psychology is actually designed to be busy all the time because of how they were raised. That kind of spaciousness actually feels very uncomfortable to their nervous system. So whenever the space appears, they fill it with stuff. So we can have the best strategies and tactics, but unless that we upgrade the founder psychology in lockstep, they're not going to be able to take advantage of the strategies and tactics. And that's why, it's not just about having a Ferrari, it's also about being the kind of person who is a match to that Ferrari, who can drive that Ferrari, who can really, you know, leverage that tool in the most optimal way possible. And of
Yeah.
course, we want to get to where we want to get to. It's really fun having a Ferrari, but if I go in the opposite direction of where I actually want to end up, if I keep getting further and further away, then that's not that's not success either. So I see a lot of people, business produces a lot of money, they work really hard, but they start having back issues and then they herniate a disc. Their quality of life and their health is in the toilet. And to me, that's still failure. Or they burn through a relationship. They can't have a healthy, stable relationship. They blow up their family. That's still failure to me.
Yeah.
So we don't want one thing at the cost of something else that we really value. So to actually fit that whole equation in a way that it solves for our ideal life, that's what requires a higher level of thinking because the next level of business is going to be produced by a higher level of our mind. The lower level is not going to be able to create the higher level of business. Not compatible. If you've proven that you can deliver an outcome in the fitness niche and get
Mm-hmm.
clients, this is only going to make that simpler, easier, more efficient. When we build a business around real authenticity, we don't need to sell that much because I'm just, okay, this is how I see the world. This is how I see business. This is how I've constructed the model. And if that appeals to you, if you agree with that, and that's something you want as well, then there's a natural fit here. But I don't try to convince anyone to buy from me because that's not my job. It's not my job to make them decide what they should do. That's what creates a lot of pressure in business when we take responsibility for what someone else should do or not do. But that usually means we're not taking enough responsibility for ourselves, which means we're not actually totally clear on who we are and what we believe. And so that causes a divergence in our relationship with ourselves. And then we don't really know what we're selling. And if we don't know what we're selling, maybe we know at a vague level, a high level claim, but if we don't truly understand ourselves, then we don't truly understand what we sell. If we don't know
Yeah.
what we're selling, then it needs a lot of force and convincing and salesmanship to actually sell it. And here's the other thing, like I'm not optimizing for money,
Yeah.
which is why I make a lot of money. Whenever we have a need for money, we're pushing money away, right? So because I'm optimizing for resonance, I'm only speaking to the people who are very resonant with me and my work and my ideas. And it repels the other people. The game we're playing is we want this business to feel like we're just hanging out with the people we'd want to hang out with anyway. And that's actually the secret to retention, because that's what creates belonging. That's what creates this sense of camaraderie and we're in this together and it's us against the world. And that not intentionally trying to create a polarity and this is us and that's the world, but there is a big difference in how we do things in the accelerator and people on the outside think differently. That's okay. But when someone spends some time on the inside and they go back out and they're like, oh wow, like people are so wasteful. Like they're doing so many things, they're just running as hard as possible on the hamster wheel. They naturally realize that they belong to this small group of people who are choosing a radically different way to operate. And we want to stay connected to that. So the basis for the entire model is us knowing ourselves and knowing who we are and what we want and having the courage to be radically authentic. Because when I say I don't want to have a team, if there's something in my business that requires me to hire someone, I choose to reevaluate how I'm thinking about it because it doesn't match my values. And a lot of people will disagree with that and say, if you don't have a team, then what are you even doing? Then you're not truly scaling. That's cool. Another pattern that I see, which is entrepreneurs will do anything to avoid scaling into pain. So when the model isn't aligned, and sales calls are a great example, I get a lot of people who are like, I'm already doing as many sales calls as I could. I want to double the business, and I'm not letting myself grow the business because growing the business is going to mean more of the things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so this becomes a little bit of a straitjacket. And the hard thing in that situation is the entrepreneur sabotaging the growth of the business for sure because they're already maxed out, but they also have a really hard time letting go of the thing that's working, even though it doesn't really, when someone joins the accelerator and they're stuck in that model, sometimes depending on the person, it takes a little bit of massaging to for them to actually let go of the thing that was working. Like it was working enough, but it wasn't really working really well. And I see this a lot where entrepreneurs, something I've seen is that they have an extraordinary ability to tolerate pain. And entrepreneurs will tolerate a lot of stuff. And generally, this is what keeps them attached to the good enough and keeps them away from the excellent. And this shows up in a variety of ways. There are all these things that are working. It's not as great as we want it to be, but it's working, like the classic VSL book a call funnel. I was talking to someone the other day and they're paying 2 grand for a booked call, and it's painful because they also have to pay setters and closers and all that, but it's working. So they're unwilling to actually let go of it and turn it off and do something different that might work much better, that might free up 40% of their margins, that might actually require a lot less time to manage because fundamentally there's a lot of fear. It's like, if I let go of this thing that's working, everything's going to fall apart. We usually, if we want something that's dramatically better, we're going to have to let go of the thing that's mediocre.
Sure.
We're going to have to stop tolerating certain things. And it's usually our ability to be okay with what's mediocre that keeps us from having what's, truly excellent and exceptional. Let's say we create that offer and and we launch that to your list and we sell it without a call, and you get 10 people in without a call, and it breaks your brain because you're like, wait, I just made a bunch of money without a call. Now I can take the handbrake off that's keeping me from making more offers, right? Once we break that connection between more money and more problems, if more money comes without more problems, then your willingness to receive more money is going to be much more. That's why we focus so much on simplifying and efficiency and making things easier, because we don't wear difficulty and challenge and hustle and grind as a badge of honor, because there's no prizes for who hustled the most. It's a great time to simplify and, choose something that actually serves this next chapter of your life much better. So I just want you to know you're very close. You've done all the hard work. You paid the dues. This is how do we switch the equation so you receive way more than you have to actually put in.